Marco, why are all of your reviews positive? I don't get it. That's a question that I get asked from time to time, and first, well, they're not. But it is true that most of my reviews are positive because I love gaming, so chances are that when I play a game, I like it. I love the activity of gaming. And before I play a game, I look into it. I try to look for information and get a sense of whether it's a game that I may like or not, and I try to play as much as I can games that I like. Because I value my time, I can't play every game. So since I try to play games that I think I would like, that increases the number of games that I play that I like, and therefore of positive reviews that come out of that process. It's pretty simple, I think. Despite all this, from time to time I still come across games that are just so inexcusably bad that the resulting review will have to be very negative. And you wonder, why is Marco giving me this little speech in his introduction to the review of Cypress Legacy, the board game? I think you'll find out pretty soon. Cypress Legacy, the board game, is a game based on an intellectual property, a franchise that frankly I'm not familiar with. As far as I can glean it from the game, it is a story of people that are trapped in a mansion where there is a rogue AI, there are animated constructs, and these people are looking for something called inheritances, and they need to collect these inheritances and then try to leave the mansion. It's a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. It's a big production, and this is just the standard version, which is $70. So then there is a deluxe version, which is, I believe, $180. So this is my intro. Let me show how the game works, and then I'll proceed to share my conclusions with you in the last segment of this video. The game takes place on this mounted board, which is definitely reminiscent of the board of Clue, just a little fancier. The detail in the art in the various rooms is pretty impressive. The board is very glossy and basically it represents the mansion in which the players are trapped. Players will move in the spaces here in the hallways, they will enter rooms, a green door you can always move through, a yellow and red door or a black and white door requires special cards or resources or game effects to go through. And then you have icons in the hallways, and usually when you land on an icon or move through an icon, you will collect the resource indicated on the icon. And here we have, well, the other main element of the game, truly the main element of the game, which is cards, 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 and then more cards, cards for everything. You have a standee that you place on the board on one of these icons. These are the starting spaces. You also start the game with a weapon. Weapons all have a numerical modifier here. They also have a grid. Don't worry about it for now. You only use the grid in player versus player combat. And then there may also be effects described here at the bottom. Some effects, well, that's just flavor text, I assume. Oopsie. You also have assets. You gain an asset card, well, weapons. You gain extra weapons when you land or move through that space. You gain an asset when you land on that kind of icon there. Assets will give you different types of benefits. Pretty much you do what it says when you use the asset, and feel free to pause to get a sense of what these do. We find the assets to be very situational and frankly rarely all that useful. Inheritances, this is the heart of the game. There will be a number of them available depending on the number of players, and a number of them are necessary to win the game. Again, that number depends on the number of players. They represent different rooms. At the beginning only one is visible. Game effects may be used to trigger the presence, to reveal more inheritances so then more will be available. And basically, once you reveal a card, it will tell you the room in which an inheritance is to be found, say the sitting room or the library. Let's use the library just because it is there. And so suppose we look for the library, which of course I'm looking for it, and it's basically the last one, classic, almost the last one, classic. When an inheritance is revealed, it tells you the room in which it is. Then each room has an icon, such as that one, that pretty much tells you where in the room the inheritance is to be found. So if there is an inheritance in the library, it is there. If there is an inheritance in the secret room, then you place it there. Inheritance in the study goes there. We're talking about the library. You take these silvery tokens and you place it there to indicate that there is an available inheritance. Players need to collect the required number of inheritances to win the game. Once you have the required number of inheritances, then you draw the security override key, which indicates both a room and a specific space in that room. You keep the card secret, you reach that room, and then you reach that space. Once you do that, then you reveal the card to show that you completed your security override key mini quest. At that point, you reach the finish space, and the first player to do so, collect inheritances, go to the security override place, and go here. The first player to do that wins the game. Now, when it is your turn, you start your turn by drawing an event card. There's definitely a large number of these events. Some will be monsters that you have to fight, and we'll talk about those later. You know what? We can talk about that now. What you do when you encounter a monster, you roll a d6. You add any bonus that you may have from your weapon, for example, from your weapon. That modifier there, any other card or game effect that applies. If the total is equal to or lower than the combat value of the monster, you lost the combat. And what happens? Simply, you skip the rest of your turn. And just so that you know, skipping turns is the basic default penalty that you have in this game. Almost everything bad that happens to you results in you skipping your present turn and sometimes also next turn. So if I don't exceed the combat value of the enemy, that one for example, or this one, then I simply skip the rest of the turn. I flip the card, roll a die, lose, and then I lost the rest of the turn. If I exceed the combat value of the monster or the enemy, then actually I get a movement bonus. The movement bonus is equal to the difference between the combat value of the monster and the combat value that I generated. Suppose that I roll a 6, I have a +3 combat value, so my total is now 9. I defeat the knight in the shadows. 9 minus 5 is 4, so I have a movement bonus of 4. This is if you find monsters. Otherwise, in most cases, you will simply find different events and simply you do what it says. You do what it says. The game effects are self-explanatory. Some are very long though. Well, feel free to pause and read that text. Sometimes the card that you draw as an event tells you, well, you skip the rest of the turn, because I told you that happens a lot. So, remember, at the beginning of your turn, always draw an event card that may resolve in a self-explanatory event, do what it says, or combat, in which case you resolve the combat. Then, if you haven't lost your turn because of that game effect, you will move. To move, you roll a d6, and that is the movement value that you're gonna move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 6. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yay! Plus bonuses. Oh, wait a second. Remember, I have a combat bonus. If you reach a space with an inheritance, you collect the inheritance, and a new one is revealed. If you move through weapons, you collect a weapon. If you move through assets, you collect assets. Pretty much self-explanatory. Now, When you're moving, you cannot move diagonally, you cannot retrace your steps, so you cannot collect from the same icon multiple times in a turn, because that would be cheating and also your movement will look really silly. Other things, the first time you pick up an inheritance, you also collect a skill that you will have for the rest of the game. It will give you a benefit like that. So you got lucky because you were able to get an inheritance early because you rolled 6s and 5s for movement and your opponents rolled 1s and 2s, and after that you get a bonus that will make you even more lucky for the rest of the game. Some icons on the board will give you the chance of looking for a classified prototype. These are powerful items. What you do with the classified prototypes is you roll a d6 twice. If at least one of them is a 5 or a 6, then you acquire a classified prototype, otherwise you lose your next turn. Some game effects will send you to the storage room, in which case each turn you're trapped in there, you roll a die, if you roll a 5 or a 6, you get out, otherwise you'll waste your turn, and that can happen up to twice. The third turn you escape from there automatically. There may be a couple of other things, but this is pretty much the general idea. Each turn, draw an event card, then move randomly, meaning random die, draw movement die, plus possible modifiers, go around, look for those inheritances. Actually, no, there is another thing that I want to mention, which is player versus player combat. You may attack another player if the position of the player is in the grid indicated here. So for example, if I want to attack, if I'm here, want to attack that enemy with the whip, I could, because you can see I can attack 2 spaces orthogonally. So I declare an attack and I simply roll the die, apply modifier. The defender rolls a die, applies combat modifiers. So if I'm able to win, I get to steal one of their cards, and that's how you steal inheritances or other things, for example. If it's a tie, nothing happens. If I roll less than that, so guess what penalty I get? Yes, you guessed it, I'm gonna skip my next turn. This in general is how you play Cypress Legacy. It's bad. This game is really, really bad. And probably if you watch the main segment of my video and you know anything about board gaming, you figured that out by now. There is no game in here. There is basically no game. It is all and entirely randomness. It is a game that shows no awareness of what has happened in game design between, let's say, 1975 and now. I don't know what the process behind the making of this game was, but from the game, what it looks like, which after all is what matters. If it turns out it was made differently, but the game still looks like that way, that's how you perceive it, that's what matters to us players. It looks like this is a game that was designed by somebody that played a lot of Clue and Monopoly and other mass market games and has little idea of what Board Game Geek is, or in any case, again, of what has happened in game design. How in the last 30 years, game design has given players more and more agency, more and more thematic consistency and depth. The games have turned us into more active agents, have given us more interesting decisions, have found balancing mechanisms. This game has none of that. It really seems like a slightly themed, repurposed version of Clue. Not just because of what the board looks like, but because of the massive randomness. Actually, it has more randomness than Clue, in which you have a little bit of deduction element, although it's like checking things off a list. It has the randomness of Monopoly on the board of Clue. There is no interesting decision. There is no interesting decision to be made. The website said this is a game with depth and strategy. How is that possible? Where basically it's all about the cards that you draw and the dice that you roll, and there are a lot of positive loops. A term, if you're not familiar with in game design, which means loops that make lucky or strong people stronger and people that are behind weaker, which increases the gap between people that are ahead and creates runaway leader problems. Because where's the strategy if I roll a 1 and I move by 1? And you roll a 6 and you move by 6 and you're closer to the next inheritance. By the way, there's only 1 inheritance on the board maybe. Whoa, what depth of strategy there. Where should I go? Or I don't have enough inheritances to win, and you do. I could just sit in a corner and cry or try to steal them from you. There are very few decisions. There are non-decisions really. The next thing to do is always obvious. But then if you're able to actually implement it or not, does not have to do with your superior strategy. It has to do with you roll 1 and 2 consistently or 5 and 6 consistently. Oh well, but it's also the cards. Yeah, again, maybe I roll poorly and then I draw a card in which I find an enemy that I cannot defeat, and that happens, but it's an enemy that as a penalty, if you don't defeat them, takes away your weapon. So now I am behind, I lost time, I don't have a weapon, you have an inheritance, you have a weapon, so you will consistently win more battles against monsters and get more advantages, and I will consistently get fewer battles, lose more battles. Yeah, maybe then I can go and get a weapon somewhere on the board, but I'm wasting time. I've seen games where a player has spent most of the time in the storage room. You can imagine how much fun they had because they consistently got game effects to send them to the storage room, and they were, guess what, rolling, and they weren't rolling well, so they were spending three turns each time they were sent to the storage room. It is not just that the game, well, again, the game has no relevant decisions in it. Even if you win, you don't really feel that you won. You felt the dice and cards won through you. And so you just have all of these problems that you have in mass market games, which is the reason why on Board Game Geek, hobby players rate hobby games so high and mass market games are so low. And why, in fact, in hobby gaming and in mass market games are two worlds that are not even intersecting anymore. Precisely because hobby games has moved away from those terrible ideas that are okay if you play games once or twice a year, and then Monopoly for you is just a way of hanging out with your visiting uncle. Better than to listen to the visiting uncle stories. Oh, roll the dice, uncle. But if you play games as a passion, these mechanics, you just can't stand them anymore. And that's why people that I play this game with and myself, we just dislike this game so intensely. It's so dated, it's so unaware of anything that has happened in game design in the last 30 years. This could have been the best game of 1975. Oh well, now we had Dungeon in 1975, which is like actually slightly better. This could have been the second best game of 1975, but it has to be one of the worst hobby games of 2019 or of the 2010s. If I had bought this game, I mean, I feel like I wasted my time playing this game, but maybe I'm not. I haven't, because at least I'm able to film this warning. But at least this review is based on a free review copy. If I'd also had to spend $70 for this game, I think I would have been angry. Not that the designer or the publisher, they have the right to come up with whatever you want. I would have been angry at myself for not looking for information about this game, not reading or watching reviews before spending $70. But you don't have that excuse. You have just watched a video review about Cypress Legacy, the board game. So it's up to you. You know what? It's your money. It's your time. You should be free to use them or waste them anytime you want. Cypress Legacy, the board game.